this event is being hosted by the Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. And we want to take the time to remember that this institution is built upon the lands of the Seneca Cayuga people, among others, who were displaced as part of a history of genocide and land seizure. You can find ways to support current day communities at the Native American Indian Center of Central Ohio. And now we have all that out the way, let's talk a bit about Magma Poetry 79. We want to welcome you to this second launch of this special issue on dwelling, edited by myself, Kristian Evans, and Rob Mackenzie. Dwelling is a word that suggests a different way of being in the world, one that is about living with respect without possessing or owning the things around us. We're delighted today to be able to share with you the rich variety of work that we were able to publish as part of this issue. So what do you have to look forward to today? We have some featured readings with Tishani Doshi, Penelope Shuttle, and Natalie Lynn Bolderston, as well as a host of other marvelous poets. Alexa Winik, winner of the Magma Poetry Competition this year, will be reading, and we have a taster of an upcoming event featuring American poets in conversation with environmental scientists. So look out for that in May. And we have a taste of that for you today. So at this point, I'm just going to hand over to Kristian Evans, who is also an editor on this issue.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. We live in a time of unprecedented crisis, of mass extinction, accumulations of alarming data, pandemics, terrifying predictions. Increasingly, people are suffering from eco-anxiety and eco-grief. As the bleak enormity of our situation sinks in, it often seems easier and better to close our eyes, to sleep and forget. A million ingenious distractions are just a click away, waiting to deliver a lullaby. Poetry, however, calls us to stay awake, to find the words to describe how it feels, to sing to what hurts, to reach out, to attend more closely and with more care to each other and to our fellow species, to see all things as kin. We hope this issue of Magma will be another pebble in the scales that helps to tilt our society in the right direction. And with that said, I'll hand you over to Rob Mackenzie. You're muted there, Rob.
Hello, sorry, I didn't unmute. Too many things to think about, but I'm very pleased to be here and to open up Magma 79 by introducing the first reader tonight, or today, this afternoon, this morning, wherever you happen to be in the world. I'm going to introduce Tishani Doshi. Tishani is a poet, prose writer, novelist, dancer. She lives in Tamil Nadu in India, and her fourth collection, A God at the Door, has just been published by Blood Axe, and it's really worth getting hold of. And she has a singular sensibility which combines depth and complexity, but not in any obscure way. It's a luminous kind of poetry that she writes. So I'm very pleased to introduce her, and she's going to read now.
Hello, everyone. Hi. So I'm speaking to you from the hills of South India, and a week ago, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi came on the TV to address the nation, and he said that India is being hit by the second wave of the coronavirus like a storm, like a tufan. And that leads me into my first poem, Do Not Go Out in the Storm, which I wrote thinking about the importance of dwelling places, the fact that the last year are places of sanctuary, those of us lucky enough to have them, but also how fragile they are, and how language is used to talk about man-made or human-made disasters as if it were a natural thing, when actually it could have been prevented. And so some of those things are at play in this poem. which is a kind of warning. Do not go out in the storm. Say the words Bay of Bengal and Buchenwald one after the other, and they sound beautiful, just as landfall does. And then imagine it, the first sign of a tree or beach after so many days at sea. We are always in the midst of life, even if we think we're just skirting the rim. Say landfall again, and it means something else. The eye of a cyclone hurtling towards the coast like a planet out of control. Sometimes we track the danger for days, and there's time for evacuation. Sometimes we embark on trains not knowing where they go. Often we are given warnings. Do not go out in the storm. A postcard followed by silence. Hurry, the lorries are coming. You'd better run into the woods. But who wants to leave behind the warmth of a straw bed, to abandon the flower pots and pets? How to haul the family trunk to higher ground? The days of waiting are a lull, the slow, continuous rocking of a boat. When disaster comes, there's no time for prayers. The radio announces, we regret to say, this will unfold with force. In the records of shipwrecks, my favorite causes remain insanity, presence of captains' wives and other women, boys larking with gunpowder, Irrawaddy, Kutapalong, Belson, how many bodies committed to the deep? After the flattening, there are miracles, babies alive in the debris, an entire novel smuggled upstream in a tube of toothpaste, a honey collector's perfect machete. What matters is that we believe in our own goodness. Later, those of us who survived will drag our boots through ruins and mud embankments, draw maps of where the displaced were flung, cease to be bystanders. We choose sides in history, take note of all the broken jetties and roofs of asbestos, all the splinters of church spires tangled in electrified wire. Some of us will sit in the dictator's bathtub and wash ourselves. Some of us return to the apartment alone and find only outlines of paintings on the wall. A 7-year-old boy turns his head away from a pile of emaciated bodies. After the cyclone, I walk home, a wreckage of trees at my feet. This is how the world outlives us, making itself anew, the dark leaves beneath, so soft, so forgiving. This next poem, second poem, I wrote very recently. As most of you will know, we are in the middle of a kind of large-scale tragedy in India with over 400,000 cases registered a day, and thousands of deaths. People are dying because of a lack of oxygen in the streets. The crematoriums are working overtime, and our leaders claim that that we have oxygen and we are okay, and they continue. And so this is a small poem written out of rage and heartbreak, and it's called Are You Awake Yet? All night, the bodies pile up, withered arms cradle withered pieces of flesh. All night I have wanted to throw bricks through windows, drench funeral pyres with springtime blooms, offer breath, my breath, yours. All night these teeth ache from worry. In my house, the stove leaks steady tears of gas, counting our dead. The car ran away to become a hearse out of loneliness. And how is it in your house and yours? All night the leaders say, don't worry, we have oxygen, vaccines, beds. Look how one world collapses while another rises. Morning returns like an echo, insistent, bright, Squirrels rampage across the roof. Hoopoes toss and catch prey in their beaks. You would have expected the clocks to freeze. You would have expected not to feel hunger. And I'll end with a poem called Hope is the Thing. This was written last year when India was going through its first lockdown, which was very intense and caused a wave of movement of daily wage laborers leaving cities in the thousands, walking home to their villages. The poem refers to a young girl called Jamlo who walked for about 3 days and she died of exhaustion just an hour from her village. And really the poem is about how to hold the incredible horror that we are, and grief that we're all going through, but also the moments of beauty that are renewed and given to us. And I suppose and that hope has to be there somewhere. So this is Hope is the Thing. These days, I pay attention to birds. Bulbuls gorging in the yellow trumpet bush. Hold on, I'm just going to, I just want to make sure you can hear me. Okay. All right. Sorry, just going to start again. These days I pay attention to birds, bulbul gorging in the yellow trumpet bush, reminding me to drink my daily fill. Ring-necked parakeets flying past my office window like a gouache on loose leaf paper. If we knew our death days, as we do our birthdays, would we celebrate them with garlands of wild flowers or rush past them in the corridor of each rolling year with a shiver? Would we go on periodic diets of martinis and wafers, trying to unhinge ourselves? I like to think of hope as an organism inside us, a cluster of molecules into which energy flows in and out, a hatchery whose inhabitants grow thin or corpulent. As a girl, I wanted a man with a healthy jaw like Jean Gabin or Dharmendra. I was thwarted by a teacher in Madras who sent me home to lower the hems of my skirts, saying, too short, too short. Hope died there that day and once again in a motel overlooking a strip mall in Ohio. It's all right to be momentarily proud of being an unfashionable, shapeless martyr. It's okay to feel the loneliness crush into you like a boat bashing against a pier in a hurricane. You'll find your way back into the world by climbing into the wet fur of dark and measuring all the absences in the park. You'll turn and say to whoever your companions are, don't worry, dears, we're not far off. I'd like to grow up to be a woman with a crown of silver hair and a walled garden, but what I have instead are a pack of piebald dogs and some pots of mint and sage. What is this greed of wanting more, of baking 4 and 20 blackbirds in a pie and expecting them to sing, when you know that a 12-year-old girl has just died of exhaustion walking home? And as you learn her name, Jamlo, and are figuring out how to mourn her, someone else will say, look, the flamingos have returned to Bombay. Look how this carpet of pink brightens the day. It's the difficulty of reconciliation, this with that, Jack and his box, the continual threat of being startled. Maybe what you miss is what's simple, which isn't childhood, but that bird of prey holding the air with its claws. If you knew it would cost nothing to keep your wings open like an albatross, that you could go 10,000 miles without a single flap, that it has to be this way, this glissando between soaring and falling. You could pack up your indignations and move towards the phone booth in the sky. A god at the door, sitting on a giant buffalo, offers you a sip of wine to make the bitterness go away. The final phone call is to the future. We're fine, you say. We're all going to be just fine. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Tishani. They were such beautiful, beautiful poems. I think everybody is just really moved by them. And we want to send you as well our love and solidarity right now. Thank you. I feel like we need to take in a really deep breath after those just to appreciate them. It was just really, really stunning poems. We're so glad and happy to have Tishani in our special issue. So now we're going to talk to one of our pairings of poets and scientists. I've been posting a lot about this recently. This project, published in Magma 79, brought together poets and environmental scientists to talk in the light of the pandemic about our relationship with nature and the environment. And the idea was to create a conversation between them and to see what responses the poet would have when they wrote about it. We're going to have here today, first of all, Lihn Pintor. Lihn Pintor is an associate professor of aquatic ecology at Ohio State, and her research focuses on understanding ecological communities. Some of her projects reflect on the difficulty of human intervention in ecologies. Paired with Lihn, we have American poet Kathy Fagan, whose latest collection, Sycamore, was a finalist for the 2018 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. She's won many awards here in the States, has been a National Poetry Series pick and won the Vassar Miller Prize. She's director of creative writing in the MFA program at The Ohio State University, as well as poetry editor of OSU Press and advisor to the journal. On writing Sycamore, Kathy said, "I suppose that as a city kid raised on fairy tales and Irish folklore, all of nature was imbued with magical dignity for me, and that's never gone away." So I was lucky when we got these two together to be able to sit in and eavesdrop on their conversation, which was really, really interesting. And I thought maybe we could just start by asking you, Lihn, whether you could simply sum up your environmental research for just, the person on the street.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for including me in this project. It's been wonderful. As an environmental science, a lot of my research is focusing on understanding how the interactions between different species structure what an ecologist will call ecological communities, but essentially how these interactions structures who lives in a particular ecosystem, and how those species interact to influence the way that ecosystem functions. And so a lot of the work that I've done has focused then on how the effect of biological invasions of non-native species. So this is when we have, the introduction of a species that wouldn't have gotten there had it not been for humans. And they are kind of the vector that has facilitated this introduction of a new species into an environment. And so a lot of my work is looking then at how those non-native species are interacting, are having an effect on different freshwater and marine ecosystems.
Yeah, I remember there was a story you told, which I found really fascinating, which I think, if I remember rightly, was about crawdads in around Lake Erie. And so I wondered if you could tell us about that. I thought it was a great story.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I've studied crayfish for quite a while, out in California, in Illinois, in Ohio. They're pretty important species in a lot of freshwater streams and also lakes like Lake Erie. And a lot of times these crayfish get introduced by humans. So for example, humans will use them as bait when they fish, and at the end of the day, they'll just kind of release them into the system that they're fishing in, but often they are not from that stream or that lake. And in here in Ohio, around Lake Erie, throughout Ohio, many of these crayfish that have gotten introduced, they'll displace the native crayfish that has evolved and coexisted in this stream for, for years, for decades, for centuries. And in many of these cases, we'll have the displacement and kind of extinction, local extinction of the species that had, evolved in this ecosystem. But sometimes it can also be the case that these non-native species integrate into these communities in a way where they where they sometimes have positive effects. And by positive, I mean they'll integrate into the ecosystem where they maybe serve as a new food resource for another species in that environment. And so a lot of the work that I've done on these crayfish is to figure out, okay, we have cases where they displace a native species that's there, but in other ways where they integrate within the community and within the food web. And there's some species that can benefit, so to speak, to coexist in this new ecosystem. And the ecosystem can kind of shift to function in a new way with a new suite of species that are there following these invasions.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And just the sense of like the unexpectedness of things that can happen in ecologies when new species are introduced. I found that just a really interesting, fascinating idea. And I know, Kathy, you took away some interesting ideas from that. And I think maybe that impacted the poem that you ended up writing from the conversation.
Well, certainly the crayfish ended up in the poem, although I'd always heard them referred to as crawdads from my Southern friends. And I think I was really interested in how we as a species other that which we fear or are unfamiliar with. But how, we have a visitor here, so speaking of other species, and how that is kind of, it's inevitable to meet with the other. And I had recently heard Yusuf Komanyaka read Ode to the Maggot. And so I was thinking about the ways that our culture thinks about death and the processes of aging and dying. And then I really did have a dream about my mother and walked as much as I could in autumn, even though we were under, we were under lockdown still. And, but it was a gorgeous autumn and I got out as often as I could. And so, as so often happens with my poems, the things that Lauren had talked about and other aspects, elements of my life during that few weeks came together in a collage-like way to form a poem.
Yeah, that's great. And would you mind reading it for us now if I screen share it for you?
Absolutely.
Great.
October. I dreamed my mother died a second time. I was surprised to hear myself beg for her life, as I have while awake for the lives of others I've loved. Imagine all those I have not begged mercy for. From them, do I ask forgiveness? Yesterday, rose light pooled below turning maples. Today, leaves fallen, their light lifts instead, like steam from a pot of crawdads. I walked inside the light both times, expecting my skin to flush, nature working its change on the body, as it does in life and death. I understand the purpose of the maggot and the metaphor of heaven, that mercy is brief and surprising, that change is long and surprising.
Thank you so much. And it's just been a lovely experience to see you in conversation and to see what came out of it. And it's such a moving poem. Thank you so much for it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you both.
Great. And now I'm going to hand on, I think, to Rob.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce the next few readers, and we're going to have 4 reading in a row. First of all, Shereen Akhtar. Shereen's had work published in Ambit and various other magazines. She was longlisted for the Women's Poets Prize in 2020. She's working on her first novel, and her first collection is going to be published towards the end of 2022. So look forward for that. I think it'll be tremendous. And then we have Miranda Cichy, who's a PhD candidate at the University of Glasgow. And she's researching taxidermy and bird extinction. And our poems have recently been published in Weird Folds, which is an anthology published by Dostoevsky Wannabe Press. And then we're having Michael McKimm. Michael, he lives in East London, and his publications include Fossil Sunshine, and he edited The Tree Line, Poems for Trees, Woods and People. And then finally in this section, we're having Amy Wolstenholme. She's a biochemist by day and a poet by night. Her biography tells us she was recently published in Visual Verse, Crow and Cross Keys, and also on the Young Poets Network. All the poems really struck us when they arrived at Magma, and we were desperately wanting to include them, and it was great that I think we were able to, as we were so pleased for so many of those poems. So first of all, we're going to have Shereen Akhtar. If Shereen puts her camera on, I'll be able to. Here we are. I'll just Shereen, there we go.
Hi everyone. I just want to say a huge thank you to Zoe, Kris and Rob for organising and editing this issue. I'll be reading 2 poems, so I'll just get stuck in. And this is the first. The Telepathy of Warring Lovers. Teeth shut, she says, teach me the linguistics of the Islamic conquest. I say it works the same way as explosives pass on their whispered secrets to brothers in huts. Somehow she knows I am praying for our own difficult innocence and vices. Spare me, she says, picking up on my thoughts. She looks at me, deadpan, lips tight, thinks you still believe in the idea of a common human family. I show her a mental image of an orphaned child and my own physiology. She nods. I puff and wonder under our skylight if diplomacy is real. I see her, worry in perfect, silent, pretty creases about the extermination of her people as a sacrifice to nationhood. I dream of being exchanged, ambitious, professional, for an aid worker. Her titter is audible, so I smile, yes, the latrines would bite. Closing my eyes, I ask her by response to teach me why Al-Shabaab is growing, where in the Libyan sprawling thickets the guerrillas hail. She narrows her eyes. Oh Lord. She is sighing now, squinting at her screen. I watch her consider service in her military, and I think it nearly enough too. Show me who to call to keep her here, safe. She leaves the sofa frustrated, shouts from the bedroom to stop trying to fashion myself a conscience for a hot-spotted world. It's unbecoming. She calls me diehard under her breath, seems to ruffle, signs battle stations engaged. So I walk over to plead, smile at me nonetheless with our same strange attraction and my working knowledge of sacred laws. Pay me to work at my fitness for a charitable cause. Pay me to spread my language over yours. I place my hands over her shoulders where her prayer shawl will go and think, quiet, preach to me again. And the second poem I'll be reading is called Hosh. An Ev, far away, full of photos of faraway people. A Badje, where mushrooms arrive birdenbere from apex tree branches. Ejects his body from the spores welded to Hava, up into dry mountains where he hunts all day. Teases open logic puzzles. Akshamlari home again, a first passionate relationship decaying on the way down from its zenith. Dimming fire and a petrol kutu. An owl with red eyes in the badge. Shines a torch on it to admire. Love to steal it, train it as a pet. Only so much of Orlan left in the man, since he handcuffed his mother to bed to arrest her complaint of intihar, since he wandered into the virtual room where Genjler from all over the world shot up on video camera, joking as they slumped from their sandalia lair. Partner has messed the kitchen cooking macarona, cheese stuck to the edge of the lavabo in a banner to welcome him home. Doesn't know his own age, that this is life at a certain stage. Partner nags, only so many cigar in the dark one can take. Kamyunlar chugging outside and young smiles on their way to universities. Has a satchel too that lies in the corner of an odor of missiles and demands for his screen to be shared. Called me once, afraid of his own gun. Talked for hours. Believe he is happier now, also they won't remain together much longer. Summers are hot there. Offer no advice. Only apologize, the way he needs to hear it. Kardesh, catch her and keep her. Stay hosh. Thank you.
Okay, Miranda Cichy is going to read now her poems.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's really great to be reading here with so many brilliant poets. Thanks to Zoe, Rob and Kris for organising. I'm going to begin with the poem that was published in Magma. The Hole. The children thought the bat lived in the hole, low down the wall among the leaves. We knew this was wrong, but couldn't find the truth inside our heart's dark cavity, with its neat bat-shaped void. Stop poking with the stick, we said. No, it won't eat daisies. We knew the bat in negative. We failed to understand that we were upside down. We wanted to marvel at its pale toes, hooked through the wall like stars, to know if bats had paws. The experts brought a shoebox and a cloth, a toothpaste cap of water. They pointed at the space between the sky and ground, mimed a straining alphabet of flightways. This is how to live with bats, they said. And sure enough, when gloved hands brushed its furry back, the bat launched at our chests and hung, its language bouncing off our ribs, wings tucked against the wet, red fruit. Polly Atkin wrote a really brilliant essay in this Magma issue around a disability poetics of dwelling, and how our relationship with our bodies informs our relationship with the world. So I want to read a short poem that I've never read before, that I wrote a few years ago in response to a Lancaster University research project called Translating Pain. And I suppose I also wrote it in response to my body and how it was affecting how I saw the world at that time. Poor growing season. The year I grew tomatoes, I had no understanding that my body was failing, that the plants needed more earth than I could give them, out in the yard on a concrete bed, hunkered in pots the size of my skull. I fed them too early. I forgot to pierce the container holes, and June drowned them. You can try too hard to care for something, and I watched through the dusty window as the summer shifted, as my body took a spade to itself, dug and redug, broke roots until the soil was raw. Good days unfurl in bad years like yellow flowers. Sometimes the fruit does set. But the tomatoes I picked were swollen, their faces multiplied, the seeds like grit, stems bending from the sticks that were meant to hold them up. In Polly's essay, she also mentioned a poem of mine that was published recently in the Weird Folds, an anthology from Dostoevsky Wannabe. Today, I'm going to read another poem that was published in that collection, and it's called Albatross. Albatross. The last time that I saw you, I'd seen photographs of albatrosses with their stomachs full of lighters, their bloated stomachs open on a galaxy of colour, bottle tops, combs, fishing lines. The sky was boiled water and the room had blue curtains. Your hair was feather light and flying. I held your wrist, trying to remember everything. They had given you a child's cup, a beaker with two handles. Your hands shook as you raised it to suck the warm, sweet tea. You didn't understand my phone could take your picture. I left it in my bag, trying to remember everything, not to think of albatrosses, those dead white birds like paintings, stomachs full of buttons, tampons, biros, toothpaste lids, ping pong balls. Your cup placed on the tray before the nurse brought in a plate of mash and gravy. Your finger lifting, pointing, the last time that I saw you, pointing at your plastic cup, saying, "Isn't this the most marvelous thing?" Thank you.
Hi there. Hi everyone. I'd like to join the others in saying a big thank you to Zoe, Kris and Rob for including me in this issue of Magma. Congratulations to them on such a fantastic issue. My poem that's in the magazine, Trace Fossil, is from a project that I am working on with the photographer Julie Cuthbert to create a portrait of the British coastline. It's looking mainly at its geology of the coastline, but also social history, as well as personal reflections, and I thought I would read another couple of short poems from that. Last year, Julie visited the site of the Mochris borehole. This is a borehole, it's in West Wales, it's a borehole that goes over a mile into the earth, giving us a remarkable record of deep time. But Julie's photos of the sand dunes also reminded me of the north coast of Ireland, where I grew up. So that was the spark for this poem. Just say Yellow Man is a honeycomb confectionery from there. Shell Island. Mid-autumn, blue sky, engine puff of clouds. Good nostril wind on sun-blushed cheeks. I spent my childhood climbing dunes like these, legs tickled by marram, looking for mischief. Sand cracking like Yellow Man, toes disturbing acrobatic bugs. Then higher, disappearing to the knee in the soft cascades, each heaved on camel-footed step and ache indulged, and then the summit topped. Almost always alone. Siblings in the water. I made my peace in the gentle dipping bowl, a den of driftwood, ropes and razor shells, charcoal beer cans in a ring of stones. Hours would pass, and hours could feel like years, my fiction running deep as earth itself, a secret history, always almost ready to unfold. The marram's green-tipped quill drawing circles in the sand, like compass needles searching for the pole. And the second poem, this is a little love poem. Song. Love I sing of sanderling, quickety quickety sanderlinging over pebbles, white as moon and graphite beaked. Little sand plough, singing back to us across the knuckle-frozen estuary, its Arctic Morse. Hold me close now, hold me close. Slowly, slowly, Sanderlinger. And finally, the poem from the magazine. The title of the poem refers to a trace fossil, which is the fossil left behind by the activity of an animal rather than the animal itself, such as a footprint or a burrow. Thanks so much again to the editors, and thank you for listening. Trace fossil, coastal furniture. What of these pillboxes long emptied of their guns and men in tablet hats? The pocked golf ball of nuclear containment, squat Martello towers, the levees, seawalls, boulder block defences, lattice pylons, communication masts. What of the hides with their flapping windows or the stilted platform refuge from the tide? The gantry cranes in lines like birds around the harbour, lifting coloured bricks of cargo from the ships. These old boys tied to stakes for firing practice. The piers, the groins, the barges sunk to break the water. So many lighthouses already come and gone, and the last surviving cast iron leading lights, standing firm though long past blinking. The Roman chapel looks across the low peninsula. What of the factories, wind farms, bridges, tidal barriers closing their slow teeth? The beach huts, caravans, white knuckle rides. What of this bench that faces towards the sea? Flaking paint and in memoriam. Thank you. Thanks.
Let me see.
And I think next we have Amy, right?
Yes, I'm here. I just can't start my video for some reason. Sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you to Zoe and Kris and Rob for choosing my poem, and thank you for inviting me to read. So I'm just going to jump straight in. Speaking of Michelangelo, ask the women who go and come why they dress in white and say nothing. Why high heel girls lean on statues and throw up into Tesco bags, laughing. I saw the quivering mass in the marble and carved, but the angel evaded me. Men say winged things are troubled, troublesome, troubling. I don't know how to ask her why she visits me in dreams when I'm elsewhere dreaming of things immaterial. She puts on her leaf crown, falls from the window. I follow, cling white and trembling, because this is the way to the underworld, the wake of the periphery girls. In the forest born of a single tree, we find the sculptor wondering how to put an angel back into marble. Please, I say, virtual spaces are simple. I smile at my mother every day on a screen, go on dying of loneliness. It is easy to be liminal. Meanwhile, I have lost the girl I could have loved, the following stone long since caught up. Eventually, he says, you'll stop dreaming of her. Artist, I am too touch-starved for that. Eventually, you'll realize you won't be famous when you're dead. I say, sir, by that stage, I really won't be listening. No, I'll dream kiss the quaking angel instead. We shall be the whisper, cool response this world to the next. And then this is Fever Dream, which was the poem published in Magma. Thanks again. And it was inspired by the Dorset coast where I grew up. Okay, Fever Dream. We link little fingers as we walk, far too warm to politely hold hands, secretly longing for the slick slide of skin, palm to palm. And you, gesturing to all this blue and all this burning, saying, isn't it beautiful? Sweetly uncertain, as ice cream slicks down over your wrist, as the seagulls dive bomb us and miss. We didn't mean to let ourselves burn up in this, but we did. Sun caged in sunglasses, skin flushed. We wander through coastal towns saying, this one must go underwater, and this one must. The children float by us, softly wrapped in seaweed, as we search for fossils beneath the yellow landslips likely sign. I find half a jellyfish, cold and deflated by gravity. I poke it out of curiosity. There was supposed to be more to it than this. The children tugged gently out to sea, one by one, the headlands like juts of bone with the bay between, and us trying quietly to fall in love, nearly succeeding. The Weather Channel screams yet again, it's hot, it's a record, and I kiss you just because I can, and because we're slowly slipping where we stand. The beachgoers slap on more sun cream and flock back, glistening and sticky on neon towels, as you and I sweat out ocean in the background, deadly green and gorgeous and just enough to drown in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I love that poem, Fever Dream. Our next reader needs very little introduction, of course. Penelope Shuttle continues to be one of the most refreshing, imaginative, and groundbreaking of writers. Her work is protean, mythic, sensuous, surreal, also often warm and intimate. I'm really looking forward to her next book, Lioness, which is out next month, I think. I think if you go on the Blood Axe website, you can look at the cover of the book, which is really, really beautiful. Before I hand over to Penelope, I'll just mention that Penelope's poem, The Child's Childhood, has been made into a short film by the animator Cat Bruce. And I'll drop the link to that in the chat during our interlude, which will have a 10-minute interlude after Penelope. It's really beautiful and well worth a look. So with that, I will hand over to you, Penelope. Thanks very much.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the first time I've read on Zoom. So thank you, Kris. That's a lovely introduction. I'm very happy to be part of this issue and to be part of this launch reading. I'm going to read 3 poems from a pamphlet that came out this time last year called Father Lear. Father Lear the king so shaped his bairns with the wand's upper hand, the fire's swanny wing, smooth tippet of the spider. In the very kingdom of herbs and servants, he shaped them, from peace vessels of the animals, from toil of the flesh, from milk horses and the birds of side mercy and the tongue undone. He shaped his bairns in night's long harm and in day's bright slaughter, in the 7 courts of the north and with the mild birch of the paternoster. From his ploughing fields and his sweat, his toothed heart and his waxing wit, Father Lear the king shaped his bairns for good or ill. This he did. Orchard End, or the laboratory of continuous effort. An apple tree bent double with fruit grew in the middle of the living room, shaking gently as the average family pootled by with plates or devices in their hands. The room was almost all tree. Everyone edged round it. Curiously, no one picked a single apple, nor did the ripe fruit ever fall. The full tree stood there, a demon to behold. Who lives in that house now? I can't tell you. My childhood lives on there, and my parents' shadows, and all my days and nights that will never bear fruit. The apple tree I speak of roots itself partly in truth and partly in lies. Those roots are splinters of the true cross. They alone know why miracles are best avoided. Hearts by night. Hearts are quiet. They're full and deep with secrets. Their lives are strange. Their thoughts are dark and airy under the bullfight stars. Hearts are quiet. Their cast iron bells no one is ringing. Quiet as chapel horses, quiet as chapels for saddle horses. Hearts are quiet as a she-wolf at the wellhead or the spider's darling poison cup. All night they're blown sevenfold about the city, young and old and hurt at the gate. I'm going to read now the poem that appears in Magma 79 and to thank the editors for choosing not the poem for the magazine, and also to be made into a wonderful animated film by Kat Burt. Thank you. The child's childhood. The child drew the house again and again, always getting it right, never getting it wrong. The roof always coloured in, red. Smoke from the chimney, a swishy black horsetail pluming away. The garden gate green as the very green garden. Red roses, tall as the house itself. The craziest thing the child ever did was to swallow one pearl from the broken necklace. It clattered down her throat for years. It raked her insides with light, so much shine, it made her fall down like a cellar door. What a clang! She gathered herself up like a lodestar, she did, like starcraft, a drop of dew in the cold April air, a porch to the orchard, a whisper book, the most silent letter in the alphabet. The crayon house plucking her to her feet with its blood-red story of the plunging hawk made of so many words. It could never end. I'm going to read now 3 poems from Lihn, which comes out in June. And yes, you can read about it on the website. Lihn in myth is the far peninsula to the west of Cornwall that was swept away under the sea in a great storm. But in historical, in geographical and geological record, it does actually exist as a fact that a climate change storm millennia ago did destroy a big region of the far west of Cornwall. Palm Sunday. When the wave hit Lihn with a run-up height of over 40 meters, it sealed the churches full of people, stoppered them up with 5 million tons of fatal debris. Sideswiped orchards crashed down to the abyssal plain, no longer dependent upon the sun. Repair garages sparked like broken wine glasses at a wedding. The hands of the planet could not lift a finger to help. They say the tilt yards of Lyonesse took to shamanism. They say a cooked goose was waiting in every oven in that gobsmack city of the dead. They say the tremblour of the event shortened the length of the world's day by a microsecond. They say fjords 1,000 miles away sloshed in seismic sympathy. They say icebergs broke off the Schultzberger ice shelf in Antarctica. All this is true. The gown shops. The gown shops of Lyonesse took satin for granted. Silk was cheaper than salt, but velvet ripped roared like the water lions of the West who dealt the city its fate. Those frocks wore themselves to rags overnight along streets pinned to the tides, gardens groomed by the waves. When the weather forgot its place in Lyonesse, every dress was a flounce in the wrong direction in all the bars and ballrooms as the city swam for its life. And in the last wet mirror Lyonesse held up to itself, not a gown to be seen, nor a child, if tempest truth be told, in the place where Lyonesse had been. Make a wish. The sky has no favourites in Lyonesse, but favours all with its fair or foul. Lyonesse will always be just what you want it to be. Streets paved with the sea, days of dogfish and dolphin, the swordfish patrolling aisle and pew, nights learning their place in rock pool after rock pool. Lyonesse offers you what can't be given or taken, bought or sold. Here you can have everything you wish for, and wish it away as Lyonesse goes down in the sigh of the last ship. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Penelope. That was an absolute treat. It was so wonderful to hear the poems from the new book, and it's
thank you, Zoe.
So important as well, given like the current climate crisis. It's absolutely fascinating, wonderful way into thinking about it. I just loved it. Thank you. And now we're going to take a short break before we start our second half, and I want to really urge you to come back for the second part, because we're going to start off with an absolutely incredible poetry film by Kathy Xiong, who's a poet here in the US, in Ohio. So we're going to just take a break. So go and have a cup of tea, relax for a moment, have a glass of water, eat a banana, and at 10 past, we'll come back and we will watch this new film and hear from our other readers who are all going to be brilliant. So I'll see you back here at 10 past.
Wow, that was quite fantastic, hypnotic and thoughtful and provocative, and all kinds of different words might come into our minds. We're going to move to another fantastic poet, Natalie Lynn Bolderston. She's a Gregory Award winner in 2020. And her pamphlet, The Protection of Ghosts, was published with V Press. And our poem in Magma, Renaming the Ocean, immediately struck us both by its form and immediately, almost from the very first few words, millennia of saliva and pre-birth. Just what a line to open with. It's great to have Natalie here to read for us today, and So I invite Natalie to come and read for us now.
Thank you so much for having me and for selecting me for this issue. It's a real honor to be here. So the first poem I'm going to read is from the Magma issue, and I was thinking about how the consequences of climate change and environmental catastrophe have already very badly affected and continue to impact certain parts of the world, including Vietnam, which is where my mother is from. Renaming the ocean, after Benjamin von Wang's The Parting of the Plastic Sea. Millennia of saliva and pre-birth shed scales of the Dragon King, elastic mirror of trapped heat, mirage of brown glass and tissue mulch, collateral kingdom of shark husks and strangled catfish, thatch of rotting vine snakes, a new god with polythene skin, drugged by the moon and battery acid, green flames from the afterlife, 1,000 unfed ancestors, thick scum of unoffered bone broth, melting white of fish eyes, 9 rivers yoked under the wrong sun, open womb of sulfur, herbicides, scorched hair, rainbow agent of reinfection, harborer of every hometown we watched slide out of the world. So I've always been really interested in how in Vietnamese a diacritic can completely change the meaning of a word. So I decided to explore that using my name. Middle name with diacritics. Lihn Hong, soul. 1. A voice tapping from inside the skin. 2. Guan Am, the goddess of compassion, at the end of her 9th life, having shed the last stinging layer of flesh. 3. A temple full of starving yellow birds. 4. Ancestors who stitch your prayers into houses with the floors missing. 5. The name of 4 teenage girls in my mother's refugee camp. 6. The part of me often left out or misspelled that moves quietly through the world. Lihn, soldier. 1. 2 sisters who delivered a village from the throat of a tiger, the Red River's champions, anointed as queens. 2. A woman, their descendant, 200 years later, who carried girls from the betrayal of moonlight, searched a field for the skinless face of someone she loved. 3. Frenchman who guarded Bang Wai's school gates when she was a girl. She cycled right up in white ao yai, offered paper flowers. She had never heard a foreign accent before. 4. The ringing in the ears after a grenade shreds open the morning. 5. The rising tone of flesh, heavy with napalm. 6. A man who searches a crater he made earlier, who returns to Wei many years later, touches reconstructions of all he destroyed. Ban Lihn, bravery. 1. A monk whose heart will not burn, no matter the heat, whose words tugged his spirit from his body to watch over the spectacle of suffering, the way a flower opens to drought. 2. A woman hiding bribes in the walls, stops the shake of her hands when she lies. 3. A girl in her parents' deserted house in Baclieu, selling hats, waiting for word from her mother, hiding from an older man who has been watching her grow. 4. A mother bargaining for broken rice, cubes of pork, cigarettes, ginger to help stomach her 12th child, still inside her. 5. A man who lies on a table on a boat, no anesthetic, black powder medicine, the smell of burning. 6. A girl again in a camp, her fingers on her sister's wrist through the night. Ra Lihn, to command. 1. A girl who stops eating, asks her body to follow her into silence. 2. Bullets at a teenage boy's heels as he runs from his uncle's seized field. 3. Scripture by unholy men, ordering Ongwai to tame a jungle into a home. 4. Heirloom surrendered for silence, birth dates, sea, exile. 5. Names given up because home did not rest easily on unyielding tongues. 6. My mother's medicated bloodstream that tells her her pain does not exist, that her bones have not yet lived through all they can endure. So this next poem is based on a family story that has been passed down to me. Love poem on the drive to Redacted. South Vietnam, 1978. When she asks where is left to go, he only says to water. She fingers the Quan Am statue on the dashboard, the glue-filled crack in the neck, the hands weathered down to cuffs of light. The red tassel charm lashes the mirror as he follows the unpatrolled road. She is pregnant again. She imagines the child the length of her shin bone, its weight as sure as a white flower gourd. He stops the car and touches her stomach. She sings the only song he taught her in his first tongue. So my final poem was written at the beginning of lockdown in the UK, when I was thinking about the family conversations that keep us all going. When my mother tells her mother, we will eat together again soon, she means, I know how long it has been since you touched wild grass. She means, stay there, let me WhatsApp you a photo of the Wat Dao in my garden. She means, I've been sewing masks using the pattern from Way. Look, I used cornflower print for this one. I'll mail it to you. She means, I kept your letters from the first time I left home. She means, last week a woman like me went out, came back with a bruise on her cheek. She means, do you remember our house full of guests in Baclieu, how I fanned their backs with a palm leaf? She means, do you have enough bantao, guailan? Are you taking your medication? She means, I'm still on sick leave. There are 2 cases on my ward and my chest hurts. She means, I don't think I can work anymore. My knees are not strong like yours. She means, I never felt as beautiful as you. She means, my cousin in Saigon says the peach blossoms have come. She means, I know why you fold so many cranes. She means, I never thought we'd be old women at the same time. She means, don't leave yet. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Natalie. Now we're going to have 3 readers together. Mark Chamberlain. Mark's poetry has been published in the Financial Times and the Hudson Review and the Times Literary Supplement. Mark will be followed by Laura Wainwright. Laura's from Newport in South Wales, and her poems have been published in a variety of magazines and journals. She was shortlisted for the Bridport Prize in 2013 and 2019, and her first collection is forthcoming from Green Bottle Press. She's also the author of New Territories in Modernism, Anglophone Welsh Writing. And following Laura will be Anne Rouse. Anne was born in Washington, DC, grew up in Virginia. And after reading history at the University of London, she worked as a nurse and the director of a mental health charity. So I will now hand you over to Mark Chamberlain. There's Mark.
Hi. Thank you, Kris. And hello, everyone. It's good to be here. Thank you to Kris and Zoe and Rob for putting this event together today. I'm going to read 3 poems. The first poem is called Ideas. Ideas. My tongue turned into the head of a goat, its eyes meeting mine from my mouth in the mirror as I went to brush my teeth, having been woken by my neighbours politicking on the street. It said, imagine what they will say, what they will do when they see me here inside you. Its ears scratched my hard palate, where I used to raise the body of my tongue to make the sound y in you, yearn, yellow. I wanted to call it Young Eye, its pupils wide-cut windows on a blood-borne art, but knew I couldn't. So I called it Architect, its nose tapping the bump behind my teeth for the T's. And I opened the window so the stench of the long vowel ah sunk down to the street. I'm going to read now Coming Home to You, which appears in the very beautiful Dwelling issue of Magma. This poem comes from a body of work which deals with male violence in the context of same-sex relationships. It was a difficult poem to write, and I'm very grateful to the Magma 79 editors for publishing it. Coming Home to You. I stop dead, broken bottle, think of snails, how they have feet, each one a giant foot. Kick the shards off the curb and know, I will tell you what my night has been, moving words about the crescent moon on the mosque's minaret in Whitechapel. A snail cranes its eyes as I pass, and I think of frogmen diving for Gemma McCluskey, limbs severed and dumped in Regent's Canal by her brother Tony, while you and I live. Between dented walls, behind splintered doors, I take the iron stairway on Whitman Road to the towpath in silver water reflecting. The story of the morning I left Royal London, my stitched and bandaged face in the sun, after you glassed me in the joiner's arms, the night before on Hackney Road. Police holding my face to the floor to keep the shards from getting in my eyes, telling me you'd fled. I crossed the park, the road under the tracks, fly posters for the fight peeling off the wall, boys looking out from the bodies of men, past the New Testament Church of God, and snails curl tight as my hand unlocks the security gate, the door. I push it shut, deadlock the night, and wait for your slam. I'm going to read one more poem and try to end my little set here on a slightly different note. Thank you again for having me. Thank you for listening. This poem is called This Language is Nothing. My barber said, my daughter's in trouble, except he didn't, because when I said, oh gosh, in trouble how? He said, no, she's not in trouble, she is trouble. But actually he said none of this, because when I have a haircut, my aura says, do not engage me in conversation. So he gazed at my head with sad eyes, and I watched the mirrored clock. Nothing is where it's at. Hurry up, I said to the delivery guy, who said, hurry up and nothing. And it's been mine ever since. My ex said, are you seeing anyone? And I said, nah, seen anyone, nothing. He said he likes a bit of rough trade, then grinned and asked when I had become so loose with language. King Lear said, nothing comes of nothing, except he didn't, because what he actually said was nothing will come of nothing. The point is he had never met my barber and clearly never understood the trouble you can get into with a good sharp cut and playful freedom of expression. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Zoe, Kristian and Rob for this wonderful opportunity. A dream come true. These poems are all from Magma 79 Dwelling. The air. Now a spot of warm rain earths amongst the static grasses, where ragwort masses, dwarfing orchids, its ragged yellow, towering, buzzing like pylons. The cricket's voltages invisible, as when near the power station we stop, under heavy wires, beside the spikes and lightning bolt signs, say, can you hear it? Not the thunder over the sea, or that childhood night shock of animate metal, but everywhere and nowhere, the thrumming air, powering the swifts and dragonflies' trajectories, the tinnitus of this lengthening year. The flood. On the first day, rain doused my lichened limbs. Their chameleon sleeves with scales in chromatic green, then grey, then coral blue. On the second day, a wind came up, a squall. I lost an arm. Its yellowed marrow tore like lightning, splintered on the path. On the third day, the scene was like a half-cleared plate. Bone, claw, husk, core. A child walked by in hood and boots. On the fourth day, I was soberingly dark, then light, though sluiced soil stirred, swilled my bloated roots. On the fifth day, my leaves hung limp and slick as sea lettuce, as a head of ringing hair held over a bath. On the sixth day, nobody came, except the river. On day 7, I was an island. Around me, strange freight pitched and ran aground. I startled at my own reflection, and from my heights a raft of rooks cawed. More. The Revenge of Picus. Shrill-voiced he came to my mind, told me green, lustrous as holly, green wind, green branches, of new acorns, apples, adamite, the augury of mist on sea. He returned checkered, parting bracken and bramble, on his crimson skull a garland of ant-black stars. When he tapped, all the trees gave up their gifts. Oh, how the shrewd wood laughed. This final poem begins with an epigraph by Anglophone Welsh poet Vernon Watkins from his piece, Aphorisms. Of what man-made echo does the mind not weary, as it turns endlessly round the earth? What do letty clouds outside this blindfold? What shining dust? Algae, capillary, plumage, brittle star. Pathogen, petal, damselfly, Manelius blue morpho, butterfly's wing. All returned, luminescent, ferociously, obliviously elegized. Patterns disarray, redraw, scales tilt, colors scumble and fade. Other coordinates. Wildflowers devour themselves, take an ice age to reach you. This silence is the loudest sound you'll never hear. Yours are lightning years. Thank you so much.
I'm just going to read the one poem. It's appearing in my book, which will be out next year with Blood Oxide. And also thank you so much to Kris, Zoe and Rob, because this is really a terrific event and also a really wonderful magazine. It's quite groundbreaking, I think. Feeney's Yard. A bantam cock, a party boy dressed up, trails fitfully after the big hens, his tail feathers a revelation sun in the last light. The hens dawdle into Feeney's yard, and one with a stagger and dip succumbs to the waiting Moby of a rooster. The leghorn crows, the bantam draggles after, the hens drift on, becoming dusk. And how familiar it is, that small bonfire in the mud amongst the dubious and unseeing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for these fantastic readings from all three of you there. And our next reader is going to be Alexa Winik. Alexa won the recent Magma pamphlet competition with a really fantastic pamphlet, Close River. It's the kind of pamphlet, the poems are such that the more you read them, the more you get from them. I think it's the kind of book that will it repays close attention. I think the competition winner, the competition judge, Mary Jean Chan, said of the pamphlet, Alexa Winik's pamphlet demands equal attention from the reader's mind and heart as it evokes a tender eco-poetics that blurs the lines between the human and the non-human, and it does so in quite dramatic ways at times, both in its use of form and language. So Alexa, if you could switch your video on, I'll be able to. There you are. You always have to find people in panels. I found Alexa now, and here she is.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Just want to echo what everyone else has said. It is such an honor to be here today. I feel like reading at the end, it's a bit tricky because I'm a bit emotionally spent. There's so many truly awe-inspiring poetry and art and conversations that have been happening today. So I do want to thank Rob and Zoe and Kris for not only cultivating such a beautiful issue of Magma, but also facilitating these conversations. I think they're important and they're fascinating. And yeah, personally, I just feel like my brain is sort of sparking off in many wonderful directions. So thank you. Today, I'm going to be reading from my debut pamphlet, Close River, as Rob mentioned, and is published with Magma. It was officially launched last Friday, so sort of freshly out in the world. And I have it right here. I dropped it on the floor right before I was about to read, sorry. But it's right here, Close River. And I'm going to be reading a couple poems from that today. Just a word on the pamphlet itself. The poems in Close River explore themes of long grief and memory, trauma, family, and transformation, and you know, how these themes are often expressed, I think, in the poems around bodies of water and rivers, lakes, marine life, as well as the folklore or that are often associated with these kinds of bodies of water, and also look at the intimate relationships between the human and non-human, or the more than human even. So that's a little bit about the pamphlet. I wrote down something from Kathy Fagan, who was reading earlier, a line from one of her poems that really stood out to me. It's very beautiful. She said that change is long and surprising. And I love that. And I think it's actually going to help me talk a little bit about the first poem I'm going to read, which is the one that appears in issue 79. And actually, I'll just say like quickly that the one that appears in the issue is a bit of an earlier version. So if you get the pamphlet and then you get the issue, you can sort of see the ways that poems wonderfully refuse to be fixed. And I kind of love that. So, but this idea about change, transformation, transmutation even from one form to another is something that's important to this poem. The title and the poem itself is inspired by the 5th card in the major arcana of sort of traditional tarot decks, the Hierophant, who's sort of a religious figure presiding on this throne-like structure, sort of dispensing wisdom to 2 acolytes. So the Hierophant is sort of connotes this idea of received values and tradition. And this poem, I think, kind of came from a place of asking, you know, when we can't dwell, to use that word, we can't dwell in places of obedience to sort of receive structures or receive value systems that are no longer serving us or our communities or the world. Where do we go and how do we change? So those are some of the questions sort of at work in this poem. So this is Hierophant in the Box. Still, the world insisted on moving through me like a wind marshaled along a distant steppe I'd never seen. It wanted to make me its initiate, a witness concerning, in the beginning, the word that was, the word that became someone shouting across the meadow, there is no perimeter, as the heretic's voice falls romantically from the upper room, as the quail sonata pirouettes inside the rotted barn. But would you listen if I said the shift was gentle? That one morning I woke beneath a half-lifted window. How mineral I thought, how still life was. The lucid air gathered like blue linen. And the word, nowhere, and also wherever I was. Whatever was needed in every beginning. Zakee, spring. Early sunlight, cold as mass, and an orange peel crusted in the sand, the eye of a little god. When Cat swims past the jutting rock, it feels unreasonable not to call it love. How you count the seconds until she resurfaces beyond the algal bloom in its old lime suit. Inside Cat's room, the mattress is sea-facing, the sky a palimpsest of pink, and continuous with the done-for candles on the windowsill, wax-curdled into baby islands before divorce and children born in bathtubs, it's spring. And as planned, you've let life remove its outer skins, chaotically, subterranean and half-real, a jasper stone punched through with meaning. Window sighting of 2 seals at dusk, her face that turns to them as the sea gives way and unzips quietly along their backs. And this last poem I'm going to read, it wasn't written in lockdown, but I often think it was when I talk about it, because it was written from sort of a time of my life that felt very precarious and claustrophobic at the same time. And but I think this is a poem that is very interested in time and deep time, even as it plays out sort of in small rooms. A good window. The window may be a quiet lapse in judgment, a clear, all-pupiled eye to the universal laws of conduction, or a parable for enduring the neuropathy of givens, heat, sound, the constant weather. So far in my life to measure, I've held only one hailstone. This one had your name on it, my father said, and I rolled it away from my heart and back again. Since then, the snow has been nothing but lovely, lovely, or else the snow has been endless. Outside the window, Sunday, a bin lorry motors pleasantries down into its organs, lily-livered and decadent, while elsewhere, dark ledger of days reports you are no one's mother. But it's better this way, the heaviness of all this time inside, where no one is the anxious wind convulsing, and no one is the guttural suitcase dragged over cobbles, or the lime tree with its panoramic leaves, that great no one, having glossed its silence over every grief, that waits beyond the window for the release from summer, for the relief of failure, knowing that sounds drift because they love the touch of glass, as if they know that transformation is the only law worth holding in the hand, like a hailstone with your name on it. Watch it melt across the lifeline of your palm. Besides, in these odorless days pressed against their double glaze, no one is young or old, only porous or not. And I am one woman imploring, dear mirror, dear portal, how do I learn to number my days, asking for a friend? Though the eye of the window seems to always be elsewhere, in the groove of the text, in the bark, in the heart, and though it hates my answers, it at least blinks back. Tells me that in the end, what remains is whatever does not lie, pinprick of deep, insoluble time, the doctrine of sound drift. And the window is where I ask myself, will you allow it? Life, I mean. Asking the days, number yourselves, to each your tiny room. Oh, teach me the blue emoji heart of wisdom, and let this morning be what it always was, a far-flung galactic stone with my name etched across its face, waiting for its entrance, exit. I can almost see myself in it, this window, which always was and forever will be a good window. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. So now we're coming to the end, but we have another taster of our Poets and Scientists project, which I'm really excited about. And these are really two very fascinating people that we have for you today. So first of all, we have Zakee Sabree, who's a professor here at Ohio State in the Department of Evolution, Ecology, and Organismal Biology. Zakee's father was actually an African-American political theorist, as he told us when we met up, and he's tried out careers as a pediatrician, an artist, and a graffiti artist as well. And then one day, this is the story he told us, he got a job as an assistant helping cleaning up the lab for a microbiologist who worked with bugs, with insects. He was completely hooked and started down that track. And he now does this incredible, fascinating research into microbes and cockroaches in particular. And in a pair with Zakee is Rosebud Ben-Oni, who's based in New York, is an absolutely rising star on the American poetry scene, winner of an Alice James Award, was a Canto Mundo Fellow. Her work has appeared in every journal in the US that I can think of. And I just love the complexity of Rosebud's work and how she bends and stretches language and opens up the poem to experiences of women as well. So I thought we'd just start perhaps by talking to Zakee and asking if you could sum up your research a bit for us, for like us, you know, mere mortal, ordinary folk.
Yeah, sure. Just thanks to all the organizers for this. This is really cool. sort of platform for such really beautiful perspectives and thoughts and ideas. I never have an opportunity to be around this many cool artists, so it's a real pleasure. Yeah, so what do I work on? I'm really interested in the evolution of relationships, and specifically relationships between microbes and the various things that they're associated with, in particular the animals that they're associated with, including humans. A lot of our work really builds on emerging knowledge that microbes have been integral to the evolution of all animals on our planet, as well as plants and other things too, but I don't study plants. And so my job, I feel, is to sort of uncover the evidence that supports that. And so we use a model organism, cockroaches, one, because and this is some work that we actually discovered, or maybe helped to reveal, that they harbor a lot of the same bacteria in their bodies that humans do and other mammals. And so it makes them really, a really nice platform for asking these questions without having to harm humans. And also, doing experiments on cockroaches oftentimes isn't going to raise red flags with very many people because of just sort of general revulsion that people have for them. But I'm hoping that our work will actually help people to appreciate cockroaches a lot more.
Yeah, and we had some fascinating conversations that day when we met up, and you were talking a lot about microbes in the gut, which was really fascinating. And we were talking about that phrase gut instinct and whether there's any truth in that at all. Right. And you told us this really mind-blowing story about germ-free mice. And I'd love it if you could tell us about that.
Yeah, so there was some work done, I think this is, almost a decade ago, looking at how, so germ-free mice is just simply mice that have been reared without their normal gut microflora. It's actually a fairly difficult process to generate them, which results in them being rather expensive to work with and to make. But anyway, so they don't have any gut microbes. They're kind of like, if, for those of you that are old like myself, you may remember the movie about the boy in the bubble. It's kind of the same idea. Anyway, there was this really cool finding that if you took one of these germ-free mice and you put them in a dark room on the floor, and then you cut the lights on, they would not run. That's an abnormal behavior because typically, mice are, have evolved to be very aversive to light because that reveals them to potential predators. So this observation was pretty kind of interesting and weird. But what was sort of revolutionary about it was that when they took these same germ-free mice and then sort of allowed them to mingle with their normally reared, quite germy lab mates, and therefore acquire microbes like the normal microbes that they would have. And then they took those now kind of what we call conventionalized mice and did the same experiment, and they would, put them on a floor in a dark room and then cut the lights on. They would then run to the corners and behave like a normal mouse. And so the idea is that there were microbes actually shaping the behavior of the mice. And so this, along with a lot of emergent work about like anxiety and even other behaviors and sort of emotional states, are being linked to microbes that live inside of our bodies.
Yeah, I found this quite stunning when I listened into this conversation. I was quite stunned by this idea. And I think you were really intrigued by it too, Rosebud. And I wondered like how it spoke to your writing and the themes that you write about.
So just a heads up, I adopted a rescue cat and just now he's decided to incessantly meow. I'm hoping he does not do that. Oh, now he's walking out. I don't know. Anyway, I come from like a physics background and Zakee like blew my mind because we were talking about chemistry, actually, and I don't know if you remember you said this to me, but I was talking about hydrogen's very explosive properties and how excited I was and how, just devastating it was. And he said, well, hydrogen wants to bond with everything. And I was just thinking to myself how theoretical physics, you can always challenge a theoretical physicist by saying, make a testable prediction, right? And that shuts them up usually. But, I just found the whole thing to completely change my relationship to, for lack of better words, cockroaches, which we have plenty of here in New York City. And, as the pandemic was happening, as social distancing was happening, I was going through, sexual assault trauma and other trauma. Just that one talk we had, it completely changed the way I think about what is maligned. And my own youth as being somewhat maligned as a young Latina Jewish person growing up on the border of the United States and Mexico. And, our relationships to one another and how our gut biology is not that different from cockroaches, why do we malign some creatures and not others?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, that's so true.
That's so true. And I guess that this came through in your poem, as it ended up being titled Poet Wrestling with Tangled Maligned Insects. And I wondered if you might read that, Kris, now, if I screen share it for you.
Sure. And I have the issue here as well. So just for reference, because some people might not know what tagging is, it's the art of graffiti when you tag. And when I was younger, the fine woman you've seen before you here used to tag. And my name was Mata Rose, which doesn't really translate as anything. I mean, it kind of means kill rose, but it was just my cousins attempting to make me a little bit more like, it didn't work, by the way. I was a nerd growing up. So this is Poet Wrestling with Tagging Maligned Insects, and I wrote this for Zakee.
Thanks.
Evolutionary biology begins with the art of tagging. And I don't mean your career, my friend, or foundations themselves, or forts or moats and bridges, but where wild style still scratches a drawbridge out of air and hits up the heavens. I soak it up looking at all angles. When you say microbiomes are communities, a strange theory or experiment in my own life, a never finished thing, never stopped moving, keeping me up at night, toying with my hollows and outlines. Creator or muse, no crew, bitten, bitter scavenger strewn along highway gloom. Whose artistry slews a little known to glib aperitifs in all city dues? Who gets to have meaning, and what then becomes those surfaces? You were patient with me, with my resistance to not believing there lies a world, one already in existence, where host and micro benefit equally together. And I admit I'm still more in my element of unproven 0-point energy and exotic particles yet to be seen. It wasn't easy to hear such large absence in my relationship with science. Say my love for hydrogen when I bragged we are ashes before we'd see the blaze. And you reminded me hydrogen's nature is to want to bond and does so easily. Or how I see iron as a dead end for massive stars, and thus supernova and black holes and so many untestable predictions I've been holding on to, when here you are still, Zakee, speaking of the right now. How bacteria just wants a nice place to live, like a girl growing up in a place that maligns young promise, unleashes all sorts of violence that keeps her inside it, and that she survives, makes her a pest. That kind that yearn to tag, I did not survive this today to die unhappy. And all I could tag was my alter ego's name, Mata Rose, as stand-in for all that, choosing to go alone, no symbiosis, and if only I'd known bacteria are what evolved us and that we carry the same as stink bugs and cockroaches. If only I'd been in community with your revolutionary germ-free cockroaches, with someone who's always thinking of footprint and cost of life, that creating germ-free mice at several $100s each and leaving them without defenses. Since 3 out of 5 are going to die, and anyway, cockroaches are so much like us, with 2 nervous systems, the secondary found in the gut, ton of nerve cells tagging the dietary system and telling on the world around us. Graffiti in the stomach, galleried in the brain. When the lights come on in the dark test room and roaches on the regular scatter, and the germ-free don't, unable to go with their guts. Never a gut instinct. I admit it took a bit of miracle to not cringe. And took a roach that looked nothing like its ilk, a beautiful and unbelievably and most unnatural iridescent green, with metallic teal bottom and bright red head and prothorax. Yes, I looked up cockroach anatomy and straight bead-like antenna. How the kind lives in cloud forests, nesting deep within Ecuadorian bamboo trees, so hard to find, and how they live unlike their own kind, more like ants or honeybees, with sterile workers guided by a queen. And now I can't stop talking about them, as if their own bodies are the cure to what ails our communities. Over socially distanced dinners, sitting outside an Irish pub on Skillman Avenue with friends, and who are we kidding? We hug, and every single time, and squeeze freezing hands. October, November, and damn, it's cold, but we still want to unmask, to sip cocktails and eat shepherd's pie and bangers and mash with plastic utensils out of paper trays. And we joke it's COVID style. And all the while, I try to convince everyone in earshot, cockroaches will save our lives. And I'm put to the test when showing friends pictures of the iridescent green beauties, as if again trying to prove the worth of the maligned. But no one is there. Late, when I get up quite suddenly to wash my hands. Hours after, hours too late, after holding friends and neighbors' bags in subway doors for strangers, that I see it. Antenna first, swaying almost gracefully in near darkness. And maybe she knows when I flick the light on, there's something a little different about these times. This little one who does not scatter, but perches on the sink, calm, unmoving, while my mind bombs all the promises I've killed in just one life before we first spoke. Zakee, I mean, the last one I'll ever kill, who appeared at the start of the pandemic, when my life had fallen apart in August, etching in acid a strange mirror to my life as a young girl, for the fear a ghost, a failed buff, like how I doused it with hairspray and then Clorox I was supposed to save in COVID style, and then the last of the raid, and still that roach scurried so quickly away, dropping bits of poison and white dreg on the floor as if tagging my name in mockery, when all it wanted was to survive, and all I had was no choice that August but to smash it. And I wept, cleaning its guts and smear until I'd buffed it out of the floor completely. And this, my friend, what is meant by massacre. And I too was gone, some with it, gone thinking, what the hell is happening? Here I tried to mural the dead, and one of them always moves when my eyes try to close the windows. The larger they are, the older they must be, and maybe a mother. And tonight, this simple cockroach, who's never known cloud forests, only starts to scurry when I gather her up in an old shoebox, close the lid, and flee my apartment, down the elevator to my quiet street, and thankfully meet no one. In my community, there is no park to let her free, only restaurants and stores and more multi-family homes. I'm standing there now in the cold, the box softening in the rain, and I can feel her moving all over me. And it's not my decision to make when I open and hold very still and let her choose which darkness to take. And I just want to add, that's a true story. I went to a playground after, you know, this happened after a month after our conversation, and you know, there was somebody in the playground, and there was this woman looking at me like I'd lost my mind. She was like, why does she have a cockroach in a shoebox? And then it came out and it was crawling on me, and the woman like panicked and she ran, and I just let it eventually crawl off me onto a tree, and I you know, it was good.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I
That was
love
an
it.
amazing piece of work.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love how you just opened yourself up to like the cockroach, which is, you know, not the most favored of creatures, and just let yourself explore that. It was wonderful, and perhaps changing our minds about it, which is absolutely great. Both of you changing our minds about it. So if you enjoyed these scientist poet conversations, which, you know, it's been such a pleasure for me eavesdropping on them talking, we do have another event coming up, which will be the appearance you saw today, and another one as well, which is on May 21st at 2 p.m. EST and 7 p.m. British time. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolutely wonderful. We really appreciated the beautiful work we were sent for this issue, and we wish you really good dwelling out there in the world. But thank you so much to all the readers. It was such a beautiful event, and it was fascinating to see dwelling explored in so many different and diverse ways. Thank you for your time, thank you for your work, and thank you everybody for attending.